So very warm good morning to everyone, and it is so nice to meet on this Sunday to have some discussion on a very important theme. And on behalf of Vignan's Foundation for Science, Technology and Research, I warmly welcome Nagaraju sir for taking out his time and be here with us. So just before beginning this webinar, I want to just give a broad overview of the trends of the democracy across the world. Okay, so I'll be sharing a small PPT, PowerPoint. I'll be using a small PowerPoint presentation to give a brief overview of the trends of the democracy across the world. And after that, I will introduce you to our special guest today, Professor G. Nagaraj Garu. And from there onwards, I request Nagaraju sir to enlighten us on the and interact with the students on the today's theme. So I hope you can see my screen. So if you observe the state of democracy across the world, the recent past, there are So if you observe the state of democracy in the recent past, there is a wide concern expressed by analysts as well as policymakers over the current trajectory of democracy around the world. And if you see the aggregate level of democracy around the world, it has not advanced in the last 1 decade or so. And moreover, the data also points out that from 2 major global democracies, the level of democracy around the world has also not advanced since 2005 or 2006. And we are talking about the 2 major world democracies. And the degree of democratic backsliding around the world has arguably been modest overall to this point. And some elements of democracy, particularly those associated with liberal democracy, have receded during this period. And not to point to this current pandemic situation, which has further exaggerated the situation of sliding of the democracy. And the Economic Intelligence Unit of Economist Intelligence Unit releases this democracy index every year. And so far they have released 13 reports. And in the current report, it focuses on the impact of the pandemic on democracy and freedom around the world. And it looks at how this pandemic has resulted in the withdrawal of civil liberties on massive scale and fueled an existing trend of intolerance and censorship of dissenting opinion. And if you see this, the democracy index map, and most of these countries are having these authoritarian regimes, especially in Africa as well as Asia. And even if you see this world's largest democracy, that is India, it is categorized as a flawed democracy. And if you see this full democracy, only Canada and few European countries are awarded as a full democracies. And if you see, based on this democracy index map, if you see the categorization of these regimes, and it is heartening or it is sad to see that these authoritarian regimes are more in number. And in fact, these authoritarian regimes are there in 57 countries, and it amounts to almost 34% of the total world countries. And 35% of the world population are living in authoritarian regimes. And if you see these full democracies, only 23 countries are having full democracies, and they constitute only 13% of the, or around 14% of the total countries, and only 8.4% of the population is living in these countries. That means out of the entire world, only 8.5% of the population is experiencing the full democratic rights. And what are the key challenges that the report also highlighted for this democracy? The crisis of representation of political parties and rise of populism. So what is this crisis of representation of political parties? So if you take example of these Andhra Pradesh elections, because we all are from, most of us from Andhra Pradesh, I'm using the example of Andhra Pradesh. So YSRCP has got a huge majority, and the opposition political parties, TDP and Janasena and other political parties, they did not even secure more than 30 seats combined. I'm talking about all the opposition parties together. So there is a crisis of representation of political parties, and when there is a crisis of representation of political parties, so definitely there is a crisis of representation of views of the people. And there are certain patterns and conditions of democratic backsliding as well. And in the recent past, we have seen there is a shrinking space, civic space, and it is very much evident in our country also, from these farmer protests and protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act. And if you see even the world's largest democracy, that is USA, there also the presidential elections has polarized the society, and the civic spaces have shrunk even in United States of America. And managing this electoral process in this environment has become a challenge. We all know that we are experiencing this pandemic, and so even conducting a fair electoral process has become a challenge. And rise of corruption and role of money in the politics. And the last but not the least, very, very important, and I think this sixth challenge is going to increase in the coming future, the impact of information communication technologies and on democracy. And we have all seen how this Cambridge Analytica was in center of the controversy for manipulating the election outcomes in the previous United States of America presidential elections. And how social media is being used by various political parties to spread its agenda. So therefore, this information communication technology, especially with the growth of artificial intelligence and machine learning, I think maybe in future we may face more challenge from these information communication technologies with respect to democracy. So in this context, we have invited a very special guest to discuss on the relevance of humanities and social sciences for promoting these egalitarian values for harmonious coexistence in a democracy. That is the theme of our today's webinar. And to give a brief introduction of our special guest, Professor G. Nagaraj Garu. Professor G. Nagaraju holds a PhD from University of Hyderabad in 2004, and he joined as an assistant professor in the year 2005. And his areas of interest covers sociology of India, sociology of youth, sociology of marginal groups, and information technology and society. And he was also awarded various distinctions. He was awarded Chancellor's Award of University of Hyderabad in 2018. He was awarded Senior Research Fellow, Department of Sociology by University of Johannesburg in 2018 and 2020. And he served as a Joint Secretary to Comparative Education Society of India from 2011 to 2012. And apart from this, he also worked as a consultant for many projects like teacher absenteeism in primary and upper primary schools in Andhra Pradesh, a study of functioning of schools of Kasturi Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya schools, and so on. And he also did considerable amount of research, and I will highlight the research which he has conducted, which is much more relevant to our topic today. Instead of he has done he has published more than 13 articles, and he has written other book in the recent past, and he also contributed to many chapters in various books. But I am only highlighting the research work which he has done on the topic which is relevant for today. So he published Caste in 21st Century in India, Sociological Reflections on University Students' Perception in South India in 2020. And along with Fancy Jamashia, he published Ethnic Identity and Curriculum Construction, a Critical Reflection on School Curriculum in Tripura. With Rashmina, he published Education, Employment and Empowerment, a Case Study of Muslim Women in Kerala. He published in 2015 The Idea of University, a Sociological Study of National University in India. And in 2015, he published A Classroom as a Site of Learning, a Sociological Study for University of India. And in 2015, he published The Idea of Social Justice, a Sociological Analysis of University of Students' Reflection on the Reservation Policy in India. All these research work, they overlap with the idea of education as well as democracy. You take anything, ethnic identity or empowerment, employment, or classroom as a site of learning, which is very, very important for our discussion today. And the idea of social justice, all these concepts overlap over this education, and as the students of humanity, how we can promote democracy today. So I now request Professor G. Nagaraj Garu to please interact with the students, and to all the participants, my instruction is that if you have any questions, we will take up all those questions at the end of the webinar. And I request Professor G. Nagaraj Garu to address the gathering and participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for your introduction. I'm really honored with your introduction, sir. So at the outset, I'm extremely thankful to Professor Adam Stephen and the Humanities and Social Sciences faculty members of the Vignan University, Guntur, for inviting me and also giving this opportunity. I hope am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yes, sir. So I'm extremely thankful to all of you, and also I'm so delighted to interact with all the colleagues and students from different parts of Andhra Pradesh in particular and different parts of the country in general. So as our respected, let's say, introductory speaker has nicely introduced the topic, what is the idea of democracy and why democracy is so crucial for the harmonious state as well as for the harmonious interaction between the people. So though there are hundreds of models of governance which have been evolved over thousands of years, but democracy has ultimately referred as the best model of human governance. I'm sure some of you are aware of the writings of one of the famous Japanese American scholar by name Robert Fukuyama, who has written a world famous book titled The End of History. So when we're talking about the end of history, he's primarily trying to highlight that though there are multiple models of governance which has dominated the world, but over a period of last 100 years, it were two popular models which gained momentum from the 20th century, from the first part of the 20th century. These are the democratic model, democratic capitalist model on the one hand, and the communist and socialist model on the other hand. But after the collapse of Soviet Union in the 1990s, Robert Fukuyama has primarily authored this book, which has considered as one of the most significant work in the history of understanding the governance and history of understanding the human, let's say, human engagement with the means of the state. So that's where, friends, we're talking about the idea of governance. What is the ideal model of governance? And what are the means and methods of the governance? So these are the questions which primarily, let's say, dominated the intellectual community of, let's say, community from the 19th century to even today. All of us are confronting with the ideas of democracy. As a respected, let's say, respected scholar from Vignan University, Sir has rightly mentioned about what is the idea of democracy, what are the types of democracy, and how the democracy is primarily works in theory and practice. So therefore, there are democracy is primarily, though it's considered as an ideal system of governance, at the same time, it is also primarily referred as a contested category, right? What is democracy? Whether people, when you're talking about democracy, whether democracy primarily belong to the elite, or it's primarily meant for the middle class, or it's primarily doesn't make any sense to the people from the working classes backbone. So I think this is where we need to understand the whole idea of democracy. But friends, as all of you know that before we are going to talk about democracy, there are countries which are still even today are following the non-democratic, there are countries even today which are known as non-democratic nations, or simply where even today it is the kingdoms which are primarily ruling. That is one type of, let's say, mode of governance. On the other, we are talking about the idea of democracy from an ideological perspective. Unfortunately, most of our neighboring countries are also known as the theological states, So therefore, the idea of democracy needs to be understood from a larger and a comprehensive perspective. So we are talking about the idea of India from a democratic perspective. How democratic is India is also a major question, which primarily viewed from a multiple perspective. So, but as the topic of this today's lecture is democracy and education, what is the role of education in democratization of the society and democratization of the state, and how the democratization of society and state ultimately leads towards the building of harmonious society and also the harmonious social relations across the communities and across the regions in the context of the world in general, India in particular. So with this, let's say, intellectual outlook, I'm going to just present my PPT. I hope the organizers have enabled me to present my PPT. Is it true, Professor Adam Garu?
Yes, sir. We have made you co-host, sir. You can.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Just 1 second, sir. Just I have to go for screen share. Just 1 second. Just just 1 second. No, here, just wait. Sir, Adam Garu, whether my PPT is visible?
Yes, sir. It's visible, Nagaraj sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, just give. Okay, sir. Right. Thank you. Uh, so the title of the presentation is Relevance of HSS, Humanities and Social Sciences in Promoting Egalitarian Values for Harmonious Coexistence in Democracy. Right. So the topic, the courtesy goes to the Vignan University and organizers. Right. They have gave me a very excellent topic. So most of my friends and colleagues and students, they were asking me, sir, the topic is so interesting, right? So thank courtesy, and I want to give the intellectual property rights to Vignan University for this great topic. Thank you. Okay, so friends, but the important question is how to frame the humanities and social sciences is an important question, because though most of the scholars, they talk about humanities and social sciences in a great manner, but from the perspective of intellectual history, how to frame these humanities and social sciences. So if you look at the whole question of humanities and social sciences, there are diverse nomenclatures which are primarily used even today in different universities all over the world. Right? So the popular nomenclatures which are primarily used are, let's say, liberal arts, social studies, humanities, fine arts, and let's say some scholars uses the concept called human sciences to combine the humanities and social sciences, whereas the most of the universities, they follow a classification of humanities and social sciences as a different schools of thought. But most of the institutes, like technological institutes such as IITs as well as the private universities, generally they are known for using the common title called humanities and social sciences. And just one of our neighboring institutes, that is IIT Hyderabad, it primarily uses the concept exact humanities. Exact humanities. So what I'm trying to say is that we are talking about the idea of humanities. There are a number of, let's say, diverse claims and contestations with reference to the idea of what is the ideal framing of the name itself. So, but the most important question from the perspective of democracy and HSS is what is the political economy of the humanities and social sciences, and why? What is the context in which the humanities and social sciences as branches of knowledge gained importance, and what are the conditions in different parts of the world in general and India in particular? and and also how to understand humanities and social sciences. Why there is a lot of controversies on the question of HSS when compared to number of let's say scientific disciplines. So friends, though we read number of newspapers, we hardly come across as any kind of scientific let's say claims with reference to, let's say, let's say biology or zoology or nuclear physics or let's say organic chemistry. But when we're talking about the humanities and social sciences, ranging from anthropology to philosophy, almost every discipline is primarily contested by its own members as well as by the other scholars from social sciences and humanities. So the point is that it's relatively easy to frame what is the ideal scientific endeavor, but at the same time, it's extremely difficult to frame what is the ideal and authentic idea of humanities and social sciences. So that's one of the reasons why most of the scholars, they primarily argue that the humanities and social sciences are primarily known as the contested field of knowledge, right? It's extremely difficult to define this is a proper knowledge, that is not a proper knowledge. So why it is primarily referred as a contested knowledge is because of the last point, that is the epistemological issues and the methodological challenges which are embedded in the whole disciplines of humanities and social sciences demands the multiple epistemological protocols as well as methodological protocols. So that's one of the reasons why it's we need to. There's nothing wrong in saying that. Nothing wrong in saying that the humanities and social sciences at one level represents highest form of democracy, highest form of democratic framing of knowledge. So right. So therefore, friends, therefore we need to, let's say, relate what is the nature of the relationship between democracy and humanities and social sciences. So this is where one of the eminent sociologists by name Dipankar Gupta, who was a professor of sociology at JNU and now is a professor of sociology in one of the top private universities in Delhi, where he primarily argues that there is a positive relation between democracy. Only after the emergence of democratic nations, the humanities and social sciences have a branches of knowledge gained epistemic presence in the universities. So as all of us know that, right, in most of the Western universities which are based in Britain, Germany and France and Italy, they had almost 100 years of history. So, but despite of the hundreds of thousands of years of history, these branches of knowledge have primarily gained epistemic space only in the modern era. So only after the emergence of democratic nations, the humanities and social sciences have acquired critical significance as a sources of knowledge inquiry. So world, he primarily argued that it's extremely difficult to find the practice of humanities and social science disciplines in the autocratic countries or in the totalitarian countries. So we're talking about totalitarian countries. All of you know what are the totalitarian countries. So those countries which don't believe in the idea of democracy, right, which are very much there in our Asian countries, African countries, and also in different parts of Europe. No country is above, almost 30 to 40% of the countries are known for following this idea of a totalitarian approach. So now the important question which comes to a picture is that even what is the type of how far the knowledge which is primarily practiced in the social sciences and humanities is democratic in nature, how far they are successful in promoting the democratic value systems, and how far they failed in articulating the democratic agenda even in democratic nations or in the modern nations. This is a challenging question which we are going to just, let's say, which are going to engage in the coming few minutes. Right. So now that's where, friends, some of the scholars, they primarily argue that this whole question of the humanities and social sciences is primarily, though the aim of the humanities and social sciences is aimed to promote the intellectual harmony. But unfortunately, it has failed to promote the intellectual harmony in the societies, despite of almost 200 years of the humanities and social sciences. So, as all of you know, that the classic example is the question of United States of America. So, though it gained a democracy almost 200 years ago, but until 1954 or 56, the African blacks were not allowed to sit on par with the whites in America. So we are talking about the mother of democratic nations, like Britain and America. So the question is that we're talking about the idea of democracy. We need to look at democracy in theory, democracy in practice. So we're talking about democracy in theory. These nations were primarily known for talking about democracy for 200 years. But as all of us know that, and in a country like Britain, so though it has acquired, it has been practicing the democratic model of governance for more than 150 years, but in practice, the same country was responsible for practicing the oppressive form of rule all over the world in the form of the colonialism. So in a sense, it's primarily responsible for the death of democracy in these countries for almost 200 years. And also only in the post-1940s, 40s, most of the African and Asian countries, they have acquired the democratic rule. So now the point is that, so this is where I'm trying to link between what is the role of the humanities and social sciences in promoting the democratic culture within the state and society. So my understanding of democracy from the social science perspective in general and sociology in particular is that though democracy in theory is very much inbuilt in some of the Western countries, but it has failed to implement the very idea of democracy at the empirical level, especially at the social level. That's where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, people like Nelson Mandela, and also people like Martin Luther King, all of them, they talked about the idea of social democracy. The social democracy is a precondition for the political democracy. So friends, we need to understand that the political idea of democracy doesn't serve the purpose of social democracy in a complete sense. So one of the reasons why the social sciences have failed to inculcate the spirit of democracy, both in state and society, is because of the knowledge hierarchies, which are very much inbuilt within the ideological apparatus of the state, as well as the policymakers. So if you look at very carefully, even today, the humanities and social sciences are primarily considered as inferior branches of knowledge when compared to the science and technology. So now, in most of the Western universities, the idea of STEM research acquires most importance when compared to the research in the HSS or teachings in the HSS. So as all of us know that, the STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and medical knowledge, medical educational systems. So that's where, friends, the whole idea is that we are talking about the idea of knowledge from the perspective of the disciplinary orientations. What we need to understand is that the knowledge, every historical age or every historical epoch, if I use the conceptual formulations of the famous futurologist Alvin Toffler, who has used the concept called the third wave, where he primarily argues that the first wave is agrarian revolution, the second wave is industrial revolution, and the third wave is information technology revolution. So where he primarily argues that every historical epoch has primarily led to the reorganization of the society on an economic perspective. So that's why most of the European society, they are transformed from agrarian to industrial, industrial to information economy or knowledge economies. So now, given this kind of, let's say, experiences, friends, when every historical change demands a new knowledge systems, unfortunately, what happens is that the policy makers, as well as the elite, as well as the middle class in the society, they quickly acquire the skills which are primarily required by the new mode of economy, new mode of economy. They will become part of the new economic mode of production. So whereas the people from the working class background, they fail to get into this new mode of production. So therefore, their economic situation economic situation is going to be reproduced even now, despite of their struggle for survival. So what I mean to say is that I am trying to here explain what is the nature of the relationship between mode of production as well as mode of knowledge production. There is a correlation between mode of production and mode of knowledge production. So now the point is that how to locate the social sciences and humanities within this whole framework. So this is where, friends, most of the scholars, such as Satish Deshpande, who is a professor of sociology from Delhi University, and several other scholars, they have written a number of articles on the question of the crisis in social sciences as well as humanities. So what are the factors which are primarily responsible for the crisis in social sciences and humanities? So this is where, friends, we need to classify the factors into two categories. One is the external factors, the second one is internal factors. We are talking about the external factors. The funding, as we have just now discussed, that the funding for the social sciences is huge when compared to the social sciences and humanities. So somewhere along the line, there is a feeling among the policy makers that the written form, the social sciences and humanities, is very, very less. And also that's why they don't deserve much funding. That is the basic, let's say, assumption of the policy makers as well as the educational administrators, right? And the second important factor is the employment opportunities. As just now mentioned, that because of, let's say, relatively less employment opportunities, most of these scholars, most of the people from the middle class and working class background, they feel that it's completely risky affair to study the social science and the humanities disciplines. So therefore, this unequal employment opportunities is also one of the reasons for, let's say, the decline of teaching and research in humanities and social sciences. And the third and the most important point is ideological issues. As I just mentioned, unlike the STEM research, which primarily works on the means and methods of objective neutrality to a large extent, but we're talking about the HSS, as the nature of the disciplines itself demands the multiple perspectives, which primarily leads to some kind of contested ideological orientations as well as the methodological orientations. So this contested, let's say, methodological approach based on the preconceived ideological assumptions primarily led to primarily led to the decline of social sciences, or not decline, it primarily led to the low value for, or lesser value for, the social science research and social science teaching. So friends, this is where, though the ideological pluralism is the strength of social science and humanities, but the same ideological pluralism as well as the methodological orientation, it itself became a fundamental problem for the practice of the humanities and social sciences all over the world in general and India in particular. So now, apart from this, what are the internal factors which are also primarily responsible? Just now I mentioned about lack of scientific methodological protocols, right? So because of lack of scientific methodological protocols, though some 30 to 40% of the people, scholars, who try to follow the basic protocols which are part of the humanities and social science research, but because of the, let's say, 60%, it tends to, it primarily leads to a kind of low or poor opinion about the humanities and social science research and teachings. And the second and most important point is that commitment to the disciplines and discourses is primarily felt is relatively less among the scholars are among the students and teachers who are known for following this kind of admin. This is the blame. This is the general comment which primarily comes from the scholars who primarily part of the STEM research. So now, because of this kind of ecology of intellectual orientation, this is where one of the famous social scientists by name of Shiveshwanathan, who uses the concept called the ecology of knowledge. So we're talking about the ecology of knowledge systems. The ecology of knowledge itself primarily created a kind of unequal relationship between the STEMs subjects as well as the social sciences and humanities subjects. So now this is where, friends, now I would like to come to the core of our topic, that is, what is the nature of the relationship between the humanities and social sciences on the one hand and democratic practices on the other hand. So friends, this is where we need to understand the approaches to the study of knowledge from the perspective of from ideal and instrumental approaches. So we're talking about, let's say, the idea of democracy. There are two levels of understanding. Understanding democracy from humanities and social science perspective on the one hand, and secondly, what is the nature of democracy within the humanities and social sciences? That is, understanding democracy from above and understanding democracy from within or from below. These are the two frame perspectives I'm going to use in order to conceptualize my idea of democracy and humanities and social sciences. So friends, this is where I wish to quote, I wish to highlight the nature of the relationship between the state and study of humanities and social sciences all over the world. So friends, the state is always a bit scared of the humanities and social sciences, unlike the science. Of course, the state was very much scared of science before the Renaissance movement. That's what we have seen when you're talking about history of science. It primarily revealed that most of the scientists were killed by the church in the context of West. Here, church means the clergyman, the people who were controlling the religion in the context of West. So the point is that there was a kind of an antagonistic relationship between state and science in the pre-Renaissance era in Europe. But after the formation of modern states, from let's say 19th century onwards, in general, and 20th century onwards in particular, you would see that the state, irrespective of its ideological orientation, either theological state or or a socialist state or a democratic state, all the states are scared of the humanities and social sciences. So this is where Shiveshwanathan, in one of his famous article published in EPW titled University, Democracy and Pluralism, where he primarily argued that the state is always, let's say, always antagonistic towards the idea of the socio-cultural and ideological pluralism, because the ideological pluralism by definition demands deepening of democracy, not only from the perspective of state, but deepening of democracy from the mind. So the deepening of the sense of deepening democracy, if I use the concept of Ashutosh Varshney, right, who used the concept called deepening democracy in the context of India, which primarily highlights that this deepening, the demand for deepening of democracy is primarily goes against the ideological apparatus of the state. Here, the state, the rulers of the state, as well as the agents of the state, they are always, let's say, unwilling to work towards the deepening of democracy of mind, deepening of democratic mind and democratic social systems, as well as democratic values of the society in a truest sense, right? So that's where here Dipankar Gupta made an important point, where he said that only the democratic countries are known for promoting the idea of humanities and social sciences, unlike the other countries. This is where, friends, as all of you know that each state, each modern state is known for promoting one type of knowledge system. You will be surprised to know that it is the highly educated people of Germany during the time of Hitler who are primarily responsible for the killing of millions of people in Germany, right? So if you look at the nature of the state from the perspective of Germany to the apartheid South Africa of 1994, what the history and civilization, the civilizational practices of a state primarily reveals that the state systematically used the intellectual ideas as a tools of governance. So it was the intellectuals who were primarily responsible for promoting the apartheid state in the context of South Africa. Though South Africa got independence in 1947 itself from the Britain, but it is the Dutch white were primarily enslaved the blacks and institutionalized the practice of apartheid for more than 50 years. So what I mean to say is that, friends, democratic culture, both in the intellectual field as well as in the society, is different from the democratic states. So this is where, friends, one of the famous scholar by name, famous sociologist from America by name Michael Burawe, who talks about the nature of the relation between modern state and knowledge systems, where he primarily argued that the capitalism has led to the fascism in most of the Western countries, as well as the socialism has led to Stalinism in most of the communist countries. So that's where the experiment, that the decline of or the failure of the socialist model to a large extent is attributed to the Stalinist notion of democracy, Stalinist notion of let's say socialism, which primarily works against the idea of the authentic socialism as well as the authentic idea of democracy of the people. So this is where, friends, what is the solution? Solution is that, is there a possibility to work towards the public HSS, public social sciences and humanities? So I am taking the intellectual inputs from the writings of Michael Burawe, who made an interesting, let's say, article where he primarily argued that this whole idea, he primarily used the concept called the public sociology or public social sciences. So here the important question is that he makes an important observation. He says that the aspiration for public humanities and social sciences is stronger and the relation ever more difficult as humanities and social sciences has moved left, whereas the world has moved the right. So friends, the world always witnesses a circulation from right to center, center to left, left to center, center to right. So that's what we have seen after the democratic experiments both in America, Britain, and France and Germany. All these countries, they started with the democratic models at one level, then moved towards, let's say, towards a socialist mode. So even today, most of the Scandinavian countries in Europe, they are following the Scandinavian country, they are following the idea of the socialist model, democratic socialist model. But if you look at very carefully, friends, the cycle of governance, the cycle of the political state primarily witnessed, let's say, kind of a circulation of elite, circulation of ideologies, let's say, from center to left and left to right. So this is where he makes an interesting observation. So this is where he highlights one of the intellectual paucity, some of the intellectual paucity of humanities and social science. He says that when the world is moving towards the right, whereas the intellectual have moved towards the left. Especially he made this observation in the context of West, but I feel that this is also very much relevant in the context of India and all over the world. So to what shall we attribute the current appeal of humanities and social sciences, right? So let us see, friends. So we're talking about the humanities and social sciences in order to address the demands of democracy, or in order to deepen the spirit of democracy or the roots of democracy. What kind of humanities and social sciences we need to promote is an important question. So friends, here Michael Barave argues that there are multiple public humanities and social sciences reflecting different types of publics and multiple ways of assessing them. So friends, in Telugu, there was a famous poet, Sri Sri. Almost 100 years ago, he said, Kadedi Kavita Kanahram, Agipulla Sagubilla. And also he primarily said, we're talking about the nature of poetry. He primarily used the subaltern approach to understand the poetry. He said, we should not talk about who built the Taj Mahal, but we should understand who are the workers who built the Taj Mahal. But as a part of humanities and social science, friends, we have number of lessons, number of poems and poetry in celebration of the kings and queens. But none of us are aware of who are the local kings and local queens, and who are the ordinary people who created extraordinary things. None of us have any clue. So this is where, though our Telugu poets like Sri Sri has addressed this question 100 years ago, the same question was addressed by the great historian by name Ranjit Guha as a part of the subaltern studies. But the important point is that here, that friends, when you're looking at the nature of the relationship between the democracy and the humanities and social sciences, what one needs to understand here is that the humanities and social sciences, to a large extent, dominated by the dominant ideological practices or dominant epistemic practices. So when you are talking about the dominant epistemic practices, it has failed to recognize the democratic knowledge systems. So friends, please understand this question, the idea of democratic knowledge systems. There are diverse forms of knowledge systems which are very much there in the society, but we as a practitioners of social sciences and humanities, we have failed to recognize the multiple democratic knowledge systems. The simple example I would like to give is that though all of us know that the farmers are the backbone of the society, and also the famous slogan Jai Jawan Jai Kisan was articulated almost 1960s itself. But when you look at the Indian universities, even today, we have failed to recognize the knowledge of a farmer within our teachings. So this is where some of the scholars who are primarily talking about the sociology of science and technology, or who talks about the nature of the relationship between science, technology, and society, they primarily argued that the social sciences need to celebrate or need to recognize the contributions of they need to recognize the knowledge of the farmers as well as the knowledge of diverse sections of the society. That's where here Michael Barave, he is primarily arguing or primarily saying that there are multiple types of publics. Here public means different, let's say, economic categories, different social categories, and different political categories. There are different types of public which need to be assessed from different, let's say, methodological perspective. So therefore, friends, the ultimate goal of the public humanities and social sciences need to reflect the public aspirations of the people. As our sir, as democracy, he was already hinting at that question. So the basic point is that we need to, the ultimate goal of recognize what are the aspirations of the people, right? Especially the democratic aspirations in the truest sense, and also to need to represent within the disciplinary branches of knowledge. Of course, now there is a move. Most of the scholars from anthropology to philosophy, they are making an effort to reflect the subaltern studies as a part of their intellectual endeavor, but still one need to, let's say, go beyond, one need to widen the scope. So another important idea here is that how to conceptualize, how to the idea of the public HSS, right? The public HSS, friend, is primarily need to be understood from at three levels, right? The public humanities and social sciences makes a sense when it works towards the policy orientation, right? So unfortunately, when you're looking at, if you look at the practice of social sciences and humanities all over the world, broadly there are two types of debates which dominated the intellectual endeavor of the scholars. And the British model, to a large extent, primarily believes that the educational institutions are primarily meant for cultivation of knowledge, or the ultimate goal of education is to cultivation of knowledge. This is one school of thought. Whereas the German model of understanding, or German or American model of understanding, is that the aim of education is not only the cultivation of knowledge, but also work towards, but also the fulfillment of the state demands. So this is where, friends, this is where we need to understand the pragmatic philosophy of John Dewey, where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, as a follower of the pragmatic philosophy of John Dewey, and the pragmatic philosophy primarily talks about, or primarily gives equal importance to the empirical reality of the society. So we are talking about empirical reality. The empirical reality primarily highlights the multiple forms of marginalities, multiple types of discrimination, multiple sources of alienation, and multiple means of, let's say, multiple means of humiliations, right? In the name of race and ethnicity, in the name of region and religion. There are so many, in the name of class, in the name of time, even the context of COVID times. We have seen all of us, we underwent or we experienced the multiple types of humiliations because of the COVID, right? Irrespective of, let's say, class, irrespective of space. But the question is that, what is the ideal practice of social sciences and humanities? Can we afford to work only on the question of the education for knowledge paradigm, or do we need to go beyond this particular framework? So that's where, friends, here Michael Burawe primarily argues that we need the social science humanities should fulfill the policy framing or the policy demands of the state. What type of policies? Not the policies of apartheid, or not the policies of, let's say, the racism which was very much inbuilt in America and Britain until recently. Even today, after the WTO attacks in America in 2001, 2011, there were a number of attacks on the Sikh groups in different parts of Europe, in particular, in general, and Britain, America, and Canada in particular. So what I mean to say is that the dominant sociological imagination of the people even today is very much condemns popular stereotypes. So irrespective of the democratic states, there is no democratic There is no democratic culture which is ideological state apparatus, if I use the concept of Louis Althusser. So therefore, friends, here let me come back to the point. So following Michael Borave, the basic the public humanities and social sciences should work towards the policy framing of policies for the state and as well as society, and also as a core agenda of the disciplinary demand. We should primarily fulfill the professional concerns. And the most important point, right, is that in order to enrich the professional demands as well as policy demands, there should be a critical inquiry within social science knowledge. One need to celebrate the critical approach. So friends, critical approach should not be equated with the skepticism. Critical approach should not be equated with, let's say, the vehement critique of the absolute negation of the state policy or societies. So the critical approach primarily aim towards the rationalization of the the critical approach primarily aims towards the secularization of the state and secularization of the society. So this is where, friends, I am trying to invoke the writings of one of the famous scholars by name Mirananda, who has published an article in EPW where she primarily argues that we are talking about the idea of secularism. So we are talking about secularism only with reference to democracy, with reference to the state. But what about secularism in society? How far? What is the role of humanities and social sciences here? Let me come back. The role of humanities and social sciences have to play a very, very, very critical role towards the meaning making, towards decoding the different ideas of secularism, towards decoding the different meanings attached by the state towards the notion of secularism. So friends, so the question here is that, just 1 second. So the humanities and social sciences here about the critical humanities and social sciences, let's say, work towards fulfilling the diverse demands of the discipline as well as the state and society. So that's where, friends, the critical and public social sciences, this is where, broadly speaking, in order to fulfill the pragmatic philosophy, one need to work with the professional as well as policy demands of social sciences. That is the basic idea of instrumental knowledge, which was primarily articulated by scholars like James Mill. On the other hand, the critical and public social sciences will fulfill the disciplinary as well as reflexive knowledge systems. Right, friends? So this is how we need to understand this whole idea of the public humanities and social sciences and their multiple types. Like, so as ultimately the fundamental question is that the ultimate goal of knowledge is to deepening of democracy. But how? How to work towards deepening of democracy? Here, friends, the fundamental questions, as all of us we confront, is that knowledge for whom and knowledge for what. So that's the fundamental difference between science and social sciences. So we're talking about the science. Most of the scientific endeavors, though it has a number of its dysfunctions, but ultimately the scientific inventions are known for fulfilling the human aspirations, starting from the health to housing, right? But at the same time, we're talking about the social sciences humanities. The social science humanities inquiry is primarily works on the principles of hypothetical understanding, or critical, or is primarily works on the idea of hypothetical approach toward the state. We can't find a kind of empirical realities, right? We need to work with multiple ideas. Only few ideas works, and most of the ideas may not work, right? But at the same time, friends, here the question here is that but what is the solution? The only solution here is that, as offered by the scholars, is the cultivation of critical knowledge is a precondition for critical approach towards to critical approach to the diverse institutions of the democratic state and society. Cultivation of critical knowledge is a precondition for critical approach towards the diverse institutions of the democratic state and society. So, friends, as just now mentioned about Louis Althusser, the ideological state of apparatus. Here, what I mean to say here is that the how to create a meaningful democracy. That's what all of us were interested to know. But the meaningful democracy is possible. One from the perspective of the state, how far state is interested to work towards the meaningful democracy. On the other hand, what is the role of it also depends on the contributions of humanities and social sciences. Friends, as all of us know that it is because of the intellectual endeavor of the scholars from humanities and social sciences, especially the social sciences, are primarily responsible for the better world. Whatever the world we are living in now, the whole idea of social justice, the whole idea of the welfare, the whole idea of the progress, the whole idea of the intellectual autonomy, the whole notion of the human rights, the whole notion of the civil rights and human rights are the notion of rights itself, as Arjun Sen Gupta rightly uses the concept of right to development. So this whole question of development as a fundamental right, all these are primarily products of the modern intellectual thought, which primarily comes from basically humanities and social sciences. Ranging from Karl Marx to Noam Chomsky. Karl Marx to Noam Chomsky. These are the people who are primarily responsible for restoring faith on humanity, are working towards the human progress, human welfare, human justice. Right, friends? We can't imagine the world without this kind of people. So therefore, the humanities and social sciences primarily provides the to intellectual raw material to the state and society. So whatever the ideas all of us we are using, right? Simply, for example, now I am quoting Karl Marx, I am quoting Hegel, I am quoting Louis Althusser, and also I have quoted people like Sri. All these are possible because of my exposure to education. So that's where, friends, here the knowledge institutions, the education institutions as a factories of knowledge production have to play a very, very critical role. So that's one of the reasons why the intellectual endeavor need to work towards the practice deepening of democracy. Now let me just go ahead with one more slide, and just then I will stop. So the basic question here is that we're talking about the democracy and knowledge framework. We need to learn from, let's say, Hegel to Ramachandra Guha, right? So that's where, friends, here the HSS should cultivate the dialectical method as a part of intellectual engagement. And also, it also should adopt the intellectual pluralism and disciplinary diversity in humanities and social sciences in academic institutions. So this is where, friends, especially I'm quoting Ramchandra Guha, who has published an article in EPW on the idea of universities and pluralism. Where he says that most of the Indian universities, with reference to social science humanities, they're dominated by only one particular set of ideologies, right? So, but here he says that we need to celebrate the intellectual thoughts. So only by celebrating the let's say, intellectual experiences, we are going to provide inputs to the state. That's how most of the European countries, especially Britain, France, Germany, and America, they have evolved over a period of time on the basis of learning from academic discourses. It was a radical feminism which was primarily responsible for democratization of radical feminism was primarily responsible for articulating the issues and challenges of women, especially the educated and employed women of America, American societies of American society of 1960s. So that's where, friends, in every country, it was the intellectuals who are primarily responsible for promoting the radical ideas, or if I use more instead of radical, let me use the neutral, value neutral word called the progressive ideas. So it was when it is a progressive ideas which are primarily responsible for promoting the democracy. So what kind of democracy? Democratic, implementing the democratic rights within the constitution, and also deepening democracy at the societal level. That's where, friends, here one need to, let's say, by promoting the intellectual, let's say, by intellectual diversity. Here, I wish to argue that democratization of humanities and social sciences is very much important for democratization of state and society. But how? How we are going to democratize society is an important question. Now I am going to highlight that point, then I stop. So this is where, friends, the democratization of society, the democratization of democratic society is only possible with by using humanities and social sciences as an intellectual tool of the pedagogy of humanization. I'm sure some of you are very much aware of this concept, pedagogy of the oppressed, where he primarily also wrote another book called Pedagogy of Hope. That's Paulo Freire has written the Pedagogy of the Oppressed as well as Pedagogy of Hope. So I am using, by taking intellectual clues from Freire, I am using the concept called Pedagogy of Humanization. So Pedagogy of Humanization, who are going to give this kind of intellectual pedagogy? The state only gives a kind of some kind of values or some kind of let's say policies. It is ultimately, it is the intellectual, it is the responsibility of the scholars from humanities and social sciences to work towards pedagogy of humanization within the classroom. As all of us know that the classroom is a classroom is a site of intellectual democracy. All of us learned number of let's say academic perspectives within the classroom, right? We're starting from Yogi Yamuna poems to Sumati Satakam, Yogi Yamuna to Paulo Freire. All these are possible because of the classroom, right? Because whatever teachers teaches, we take it very seriously, right? Teachers are considered more important compared to parents. So that is the case, friends. The educational institutions have to gain or have to play very, very vital role by simultaneously fulfilling the professional by simultaneously fulfilling the professional obligations on the one hand, that is working towards the intellectual endeavor in the form of knowledge production, at the same time working towards democratization of knowledge. Knowledge production is different from democratization of knowledge. So our most of the knowledge which is produced by the scholars from social sciences, humanities, even from scientists, are primarily limited to only the theses, only the libraries in the universities. They are not yet reached the larger public. So when it reaches the larger public, then only the society is going to change. So the simple question is that why most of us are aware of the poets, we are very much aware of Sri or Gurum Joshua or others, but we are not that much aware of the intellectuals of India. Where is the problem? So the problem here is that it is not the problem with the intellectuals. The problem is that we are not taking the message of the intellectuals to the larger level. So that's where I wish to quote once again Dipankar Gupta by saying that the democracy and knowledge, or democracy and humanities and social sciences, primarily works with the support of each other. For deepening democracy, we need to democratize the humanities and social sciences. Whereas for democratization of humanities and social sciences, the democratic environment, that is democratic intellectual environment, is very much important. Then only the scholars are going to work with a free mind. So that's where, friends, here I wish to quote this, I wish to give this concept. Democratization and intellectual endeavor need to work on the need to work on the principles of intellectual autonomy with intellectual accountability. Then only, friends, we are going to work towards a democratic society in a truest sense. So let's end my lecture by quoting Ashutosh Varshney, who has used the concept called deepening democracy. So he made an interesting observation that if the Indian society is working towards the deepening democracy, the Indian democracy is undergoing the process of a true democracy, where the rule of governance is primarily shifting from the elite to the marginal sections of the society. But at the same time, friends, what is the nature of the intellectual democracy? What is the nature and character of the intellectual democracy? And why we need to protect the intellectual democracy for the democratic India? So with this, friends, I wish to say that, I wish to stop by saying that the humanities and social sciences are the tools or the backbone of democracy. The more we democratize the humanities and social sciences, we are to see a more democratic state and more democratic society. So with this, I have any comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nagaraju sir. I want to inform all the participants that I have opened the chat box for questions. So if you have any query, you can post your questions in the chat box, and so that we can take up those questions for answers. Sir, I want to thank you for highlighting the views of Dipankar Gupta and bringing in the perspective of Sri Sri and also linking it to the subaltern studies. That was very, very quite interesting. And I hope that maybe all our students are basically they are from technological background.
Okay.
I hope they would have understood what is the importance and relevance of humanities in strengthening the democracy. So yes, participants, you are free to ask questions. So the chat box is now open. You can post the questions. Sir, before these participants post questions, I have a couple of questions, sir.
Please, sir. Sir, may I know your name, sir?
Sir, my name is Vignan, sir. Begins.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, yeah.
So you have highlighted that we have to keep the classroom discussions also democratic. But sometimes I have observed that even these teachers, we also have our own idiosyncrasies, our own ideology. So sometimes that may come in conflict while dealing the subject. So how we should ensure that, how a teacher should ensure that the classroom discussion is truly democratic without presenting his own ideas, without his own beliefs and other idiosyncrasies.
Thank you very much, sir, Dr. Vignesh. So if you look at very carefully the writings of Professor Ramchandra Guha, that's where he makes an important observation by quoting the experiences of Delhi University and JNU, especially the social sciences, where he says that the scholars from Delhi School of Economics, they were known for following a kind of middle path to a large extent. But in the case of JNU, it was dominated to a large extent dominated by the leftist scholars. So therefore, he primarily argued that the teacher should open the mind of a student. Whatever your intellectual commitment may be, that intellectual commitment may be reflected in the form of writings, but not within the classroom. So that's where we need to maintain intellectual autonomy should not be compromised at the cost of intellectual accountability. So I always stand for intellectual accountability, sir, because as a teacher, we need to follow objectivity, right? That's how the social sciences have primarily, let's say, underwent different schools of thought, starting from the evolutionism and diffusionist theories during the colonial era. And by 1930s and 40s, the functionalist school of thought has gained importance in most of the social sciences. By 1960s, the Marxist school of thought gained importance. By 1970s, the feminist school of thought gained importance. By 1980s, the subaltern approach or subaltern studies gained importance. So that's so the intellectual endeavor is always undergoing a kind of change. So the account for me, knowledge is like a living. Knowledge is like a flowing river, right? So we need to allow its own direction. We should not try to control the knowledge. So as you rightly mentioned, some of the teachers, they are trying to impose their own ideological perspectives on the students. That's where we as intellectual, we are subjected to criticism by the state. So because of, let's say, some 20% of the intellectual community, the entire intellectual community is primarily labeled, right? I don't want to give the details, examples and all, but all of you know them, right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Thank you, sir. And I have another question regarding Hegel, sir. But before that, one of the participants have posted a question in the chat box. So I'll read out the chat box question, sir. So what is the scope of humanities in employment opportunities?
Okay. So thank you, sir. Very good question. See, until recently, there is a feeling that only the students from humanities and social sciences are more unemployed or unemployable. Yes, I'm addressing the students from science, and also as a student who worked on the information technology and its impact on society, the back to 2000, I wish to quote the NASCOM reports, which primarily says that hardly 10% of the Indian engineers are employable. Hardly 10%. There are lakhs of students who are studying, we are getting the engineering degrees every year, but except few, except 10%, those who come from IITs, NITs, and those who come from big private universities, such as civil order in the context of in Delhi and Vignan University and other universities in our Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. But except these few, most of the students are unemployable. So what I mean to say is that this question of unemployability and employability is primarily related to the quality of your learning. It is your quality of learning which decides your employability and unemployability. It is not the degrees per se. So I wish to quote that as my friend Dr. Adam Stephen, he knows that most of our friends from philosophy departments during our time who studied along with us in 1996 to almost 2000, all of them are now placed in all the IITs and NITs as faculty members. But the popular belief went, whereas most of our friends from science background, like life sciences, those who got PhDs, now some of them even today they are struggling to get employment as a faculty members. So what I mean to say, that is the quality of your degree which matters rather than a degree per se.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Even the students who did engineering also, it will not ensure automatic employment opportunity for them. They
Exactly, sir.
Excel academically, then only they can find a job in this competitive world. Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Sir, one question for me on Hegel, since you brought the discussion of Hegel also, that he contributed to the strengthening of democracy and by explain the correlationship between humanities and democracy. But he was, I think he is a little bit critical for these ideas like individualism. But in the modern society, if you see this, economic individualism and legal individualism, they have strengthened the democracy. But on the other hand, Hegel says that it has also diminished the collective conscience of the society.
Sir.
So how important is this collective conscience for this democracy to strengthen? When the discussion is more on individual rights, in such circumstances, then what is the relevance of collective conscience?
Sir, thank you very much, sir. Very good question. Very intellectually important question. I have used Hegel in the context of an ideological conflict between state and society, sir. As you are aware, Hegel, when he is explaining what is the nature of state in the context of West and in the context of East, he primarily felt that in the context of West, there is a dialectical relationship between state and society. It is because of the dialectical relations, it primarily led to the emergence of democracy in the Western context. Because the society, people in the West, in the different historical ages, they used to question the authoritarian character of the state. So that primarily, the democratic experiment primarily started in France, then led to almost all other countries. But in the context of East, especially in the context of India and China, where he says that in the context of China, it is the state which has primarily engulfed or which primarily encompassed the society, that is the people. So where the state reduced the people as a material entity, not a human entity. That's where as a material entity they can't assert their rights. We don't know what is happening in China. You and me are lucky enough to see what is happening all over the world by using Google. Of course, though Google has its own limitations. As you rightly mentioned, how artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are primarily, let's say, used in the Google, also primarily sets a kind of one type of agenda with the limitations of the science and technology. But still, we can say that we are in a position to experience the democratic space on this cyberspace. There is a democratic space in cyber world. That's what my feeling is. But in the case of China, we don't know. China has their own Google. We can't access what is happening in Google. So the point is that here, the individual in the context of China is reduced to the material. So that's where, who are responsible for this? It is the state. It is the state which is state used to encroach. State has encroached all the fundamental rights of the people. As you and me know, what has happened in Tiananmen Square, way back to 1990s. Thousands of students were butchered on the day itself, not even night. On the day itself, thousands of students were butchered by the Chinese state. So here, Hegel's point of the state is a dominant factor in the context of China. Whereas in the context of India, it is the Varna system. It is the Varna system which has engulfed the functions of the state. So therefore, there is no scope for the development of the democracy both in India and China. So as you know, as all of us, we have read a concept called the Little Republic. We're talking about Indian villages. Right. Of course, this formulation has its own limitations. I would like to explain that later. But now, for your question, I would definitely agree with you regarding the individual rights, whereas the collective rights. But my focus of dialogue here is that the dialectical materialist method, when Karl Marx primarily derived that method from Hegel, which primarily led to the emergence of democracy. That's what I am trying to say.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So there are a couple of questions from one of our students. So the present situation of India is changing in terms of the quality of democracy, especially the weakening of opposition political parties. And consequently, many international reports are saying that the democratic space in India is shrinking. So how can we interpret this, keeping in the context of the future of our country?
Very good question, sir. See, sir, we are talking about the democratic experiments in the context of India. Democracy, as all of us know, always goes against the interest of, let's say, the elite. So here, the elite need to be considered, let's say, contextualized in a proper context. As you all of us are aware of the concept circulation of elite given by Pareto, way back to 1976 itself, when because of the legal intervention, the then Prime Minister lost battle in the court, and ultimately she primarily forced the entire India towards a kind of autocracy or a kind of dictatorship, as all of us referred as this was known as emergency, right? So though people say the emergency was very much implemented in North India compared to other parts of India, there is a different debate. I am not going to that the deeper insight. But what I'm trying to say is that democracy at every historical stage or in every cycle is challenged by its own rulers. So my understanding here is that now whatever we are talking about, the intellectual autonomy and also the nature of, let's say, the growing autocracy, that also need to be understood as a kind of a cycle, the cycle of democracy. So the kind of one type of, let's say, oppression leads to another type of resistance, right? As you know, that the democracy survives on resistance. The resistance of two types. One is the intellectual resistance. Second one is the empirical resistance. As you rightly mentioned, empirical resistance primarily comes in the form of the farmers' movement or the workers' movements, right? The common people, they're demanding against the price rates and all. So my point is that, sir, this is a cycle. I'm sure India is going to be a great democratic model even forever. That's my strong belief. Because at one level, we should not buy the argument of the Western media. Way back to 1947, when India got independence, most of the Western countries, and especially the British, they felt that India is going to be balkanized, right? Of course, I am not talking like a nationalist here, but I am also trying to argue that I am taking a kind of what are the positive and negative, let's say, approaches, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. That's where, sir, this is, I feel that's like a cycle.
Yes,
Very
sir.
soon, definitely, we are going to overcome this cycle. That's what I feel.
So basically, inherently, there are certain tools within the democratic apparatus which tries to fight back the authoritarian.
Exactly, sir. Exactly,
Yes.
sir. That's what I mean to say. Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
There is also another question, sir. So, as you have rightly said, that there is an antagonistic relationship between the state and democracy.
Yes.
Always a conflicting relationship between state and democracy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, one of the important institutions of the state, that is judiciary, how this can shape the democracy, how the judiciary can shape the.
Very good. Excellent question, sir. See, that's where I wish to just accidentally, just 2 days back, I read an article by our Honorable Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramana Garu, as he mentioned that the rule of law is different from rule by law, right? Rule of law and rule by law. So, what I feel that in the context of India, we need to celebrate the judicial autonomy. The more we celebrate the judicial autonomy, the more democratic freedom we are going to guarantee. Sir. So thanks to one of our seniors, Professor Adam Stephen knows him. His name is Niranjan Sahu. Niranjan Sahu worked for his PhDs from Political Science Department, worked with Professor Shanta Sinha on judicial activism and its contributions on environmental development. So if you look at very carefully, it is because of the judicial intervention, even we are in a position to at least retain the spirit of environmental justice. So I definitely feel that the judicial autonomy and creating conducive environment, creating conducive environment for judicial system is very, very essential for restoring the faith in democratic institutions. Because when whenever the state goes against the spirit of democracy, as all of us see in different states in India, right? Both the central government as well as state governments, whenever they are going against the people's aspiration, most of the times it is the judicial system. They are intervening in a positive manner and they are restoring the democratic spirit. So I feel that the judicial system, institutions have to play a great role also.
Very interesting answers, sir, bringing out the difference between rule of law as well as rule by the law. So that is very interesting. Sir, Adam, sir, do you have anything to add, sir? Do you have?
No, I'm just listening to Nagaraju sir's lecture, and also the way he has been answering the questions. This has been absolutely wonderful. And of course, I've known Professor Nagaraju sir for a long time. He has been a friend of mine, so it's even more delightful to watch him talk about this amazing topic, actually. And as Vignan sir has set the stage for this whole thing. Initially he gave some introduction to the democratic overview of what's happening in the world. So that has set a wonderful stage for what's going on. And also some of the things might be a bit too intellectual for some of our technological students here, but they have been, in the defense of our students, they have had classes in political science. We teach Constitution of India classes for the first year, second year students, so so I'm sure these are the topics, or these are the themes that they ought to be concerned with. What exactly is the democracy? What is the nature of democracy? Threats to democracy, especially from the authoritarian regimes and all that. And especially, I mean, I don't mean to sum up Professor Nagaraju's lecture or anything. I just like the way he has addressed these issues. He kind of articulated these issues about democracy at one hand, humanities and social sciences at the other hand, and then the way they are tied into the democratic workings of the society. So the way he has kind of brought all those things together, that's quite amazing. And actually, Nagaraju sir, I mean, I teach some of the political science classes here. So what you have said is going to provide a lot of material for us to discuss in the coming classes, actually. So we're really grateful for you for that. So thank you, sir, again for such a wonderful lecture. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam sir. So I want to thank Professor G. Nagaraju garu for taking out his valuable time and agreeing to interact with all of us. And we have been planning to organize a session from very, very long time, but for some unexpected things have happened and we could not carry out the session. But I'm happy finally we are able to interact with you, sir. So thank you so much for accepting our request and in interacting with all of us today on this beautiful Sunday. And I want to thank Department of Science and Humanities of Vignan Foundation for Science, Technology and Research. And I want to thank Dr. A. Sharda, who is it is her idea to organize this series of lectures on this democracy and how the humanities are more relevant and social sciences are relevant in strengthening this democracy and promoting these egalitarian values. But unfortunately, she is not here with us today because of her prior commitment. But she promised to watch this recording as soon as she gets back from her work. So I want to thank her, and I want to thank the head of training and placement, Sri Raghav Garu, for providing all the required resources to organize this wonderful session. And I want to thank my colleagues at Vignan Civil Services Academy for organizing this webinar and also giving me support to pull up these participants and also in other activities. So once again, I thank you, sir, Nagaraju sir, for interacting with us, and for sure we would like to hear from you on more and more things in future, and we will try to organize these kinds of webinars with you in future. And I think this is going to be helpful not only for the students but also the faculties as well as the teaching staff. So just like how Adam sir has highlighted just now, that you have given us a lot of material to discuss in the classroom. So definitely, like sir, we will like to hear once again from you in the future also. So on this note, I would like to end from my end, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you all, and also I learned a number of things from you, especially your intellectual interventions are very, very meaningful and very important for my intellectual horizons. And also the questions asked by the students are also very important. So this kind of opportunities gives us an opportunity to interact with each other and know from each other, and also to reach out to a number of students who are placed in different parts of the country. Really thankful to you, sir, and also Dr. Adam Stephen and Dr. Sharda Garu for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
sir.
sir.
We'd like to meet you again once again. Bye,
Sure,
sir.
sir. Bye, sir. Bye, sir.